It is my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Nicci Clark. Nicci participated in our leadership class of 2014 and was actually in the class when I started at the chamber here. So she and Arlie had a relationship before that, and obviously she was working in this area and living here. So Nicci, you were the first speaker in our series, and we're so excited to have you here. If you will, just give us a quick introduction and then lead in talking about your experience with the leadership class back in 2014.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, everybody, I need you to know this is the first time I've fixed my hair in like a month, okay? And it still doesn't look very good. It looks like I've got a little bit of a helmet. So forgive me. Normally, I'm one of April's disciples. I've got much bigger hair, but not today. But thanks for having me. Gosh, I grew up in Nebraska, here in Omaha, which is where I live now, and lived here my whole life. 32 years ago, this month, I'm sorry, when it was 32 years ago, so 14 years ago this month, we moved to Mississippi. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that experience, how it relates to my word, to my perseverance mantra. But moved to Mississippi. My husband's in the Air Force, so we went down there, and then we moved to Washington, D.C., and then Germany. And then we were in Georgia for 5 years, lived in Bon Air, and had the pleasure of joining the 2014 leadership class. Had really no idea what it was, but it sounded like a lot of fun. And so Chrissy Miner invited me, and so I joined the class and met the most incredible group of people, and all of them, I don't think there's a single one of them that wouldn't take my call to this day. In fact, I would venture to say that at least half the people in my class would end the call that they're on to pick up my call now. And there aren't very many groups of people like that in most people's lives. And I have to say, in terms of a group who took me in as an outsider and treated me very well and continues to do so to this day, I've only got one other group like that. And those are people that I grew up with. And so I think that this experience was definitely an eye-opening experience. It made me dig my heels in a community where I was clearly an outsider, and just absolutely to this day think it's one of the most valuable experiences of my life and my career. So, did you hear any of that? I can't hear you. Did you hear any of that? Okay, good.
Okay. I'm unmuted now. Okay, very good.
Unmuted.
Yes, I'm unmuted. And for those new ones, if you'll just make sure you stop video, but we're here talking with Nicci Clark, an alumni from the program from 2014. So Nicci, as a military spouse, I know that presents its own set of challenges and opportunities to be persistent. So even by the time that you were participating in leadership, you were in a career field very different than what you went to school for and thought you'd be doing professionally. So can you talk about how persistence led you in your professional life?
Lots and lots of opportunities to remain focused on my future through my husband's career. So 14 years ago today, in fact, I was in Mississippi unloading boxes. I had 2 little kids. I still had a law practice in Nebraska. I had my own law firm for 7 years, and was 6 months pregnant with a baby girl. And I went to take a nap that day, and I woke up and I said, something's wrong. I don't feel the baby. And I called my mom, and she told me to call the doctor, and I did. And the baby was gone. And it was the second time we'd been through that. Only this time I was completely alone. I was very far along. This wasn't something that was just going to happen. And it was very physically and very emotionally demanding. And I still had a law practice. I was new in a region of the country where I literally did not know anybody. And it gave me a lot of opportunity to give myself grace for the first time in my whole life. I've always been a super achiever, and it was the only time I really experienced the kind of disappointment that you couldn't work your way out of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I had to let that wash over me, and I had to walk through it. I always talk about that experience like knowing that there's a bed of coals in front of you and you have to walk through it. You can go slowly, you run fast. It doesn't matter. You have to walk through it. And that was the first time I'd really experienced that. And at the same time, I did some really serious thinking about what was important to me, how I wanted to spend the rest of my life and my career. I had 2 kids at the time. My son was, I don't know, 7 or 8, and Courtney, and my daughter was 2. And they were just little kids and they needed me. And I saw that as an opportunity to take a step back from my career and from a career that I wasn't really passionate about. I love solving problems through being a lawyer, but it really, for me, wasn't the right fit. So I started pursuing, I called Mississippi State University, right there next to Columbus Air Force Base where he lived. And I said, hey, I'm interested in becoming a financial planner. And they invited me to lunch, which I thought was a really interesting recruiting program. And so I got a call after the lunch from the dean who had taken me out to lunch. He said, we'd really like to extend an invitation to you to teach in our program here. And so that was a huge departure from my expectation for my career, but it was the perfect fit at a time when what I needed was a perfect fit. And so it was definitely a shift in income and expectations and how I spent my days, which probably sounds very familiar to people right now. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. I knew that this was a taste of what was to come for me, but I was not done being a home with my kids. So I did my best job to stay relevant through that teaching job. And then we moved to Washington, D.C. I got very actively involved in the Air Force Aid Society, which I stayed active in about 6 years. And so I did that, had a wonderful group of friends. Everywhere I go, I make a great group of friends, if you haven't noticed. And then we moved over to Germany, and I ran the Ramstein Bazaar, which was an incredible volunteerism effort. We, had about 1,000 volunteers and raised $2 million every year by selling art, antiques, and rugs, stuff like that. It was awesome. I came to Georgia, and I thought, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. So let me see if this financial thing is the right, maybe this is the right time. And so I had contacted several people in town, there Warner Robins, to say, what do you think? Is this the right thing for me? And I had somebody say to me, you'll never make it. Big mistake.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And the reason why she said it is because she knew as a military spouse, that was an incredible hurdle to have to overcome. She knew what I know now, which is building a practice like I've built takes 5 to 7 years. And then what are you supposed to do when you move? But what she didn't count on, or he didn't count on, that person did not count on, was the fact that I knew I could innovate and stay relevant, because that's all I'd ever done, was scratch my way out professionally to get where I'm at today. And I didn't know where today was going to end. But what I did know was that I wanted to be on this path, and I was fine with it being a little wider than I knew how it would work. But for me, I always looked at it as sort of a, when you go bowling and you have the bumpers, as long as I stay inside the bumpers, I'm pretty happy. And now I'm back in Omaha. I moved my practice 2 times from the time I started in Georgia till now. I am the heir apparent to a $1.2 billion book of business. It's enormous. I work with 3 guys in their 60s, and they've trusted me with an incredible asset, and that's their relationships with other people. And so at the end of the day, you can see why persistence is my key word, and how all these people and experiences along the way have been opportunities for me to perfect my craft and to open my mind and to endure whatever obstacle lies next.
I love that. And so thinking through your journey, Nicci, and where you thought and envisioned yourself being at those different milestones when you approached, the college about going into a financial planning program and then being offered to teach. What are those things as we're in a time where people are having to gut check and determine what risk am I willing to take professionally, personally, from an income standpoint, from a guarantee standpoint? What were those reassurances for you that let you know, even though this is outside of my plan and what I envisioned, to let you feel confident in that the next step was going to be a meaningful one for you?
Well, timing always is something that's not always out of your control. So once you take that off of the plate in terms of what's considered possible, what isn't, for me, the number one thing that allowed me to make the choices I made is having a husband who has a good career. So I was able to make some of those decisions without having to make them about money. But all along, I mean, so that's what it would appear from the outside, but all along I was always making a decision about the cost benefit, and when I had little kids, I remember thinking, this isn't the time for me to go out and hit it hard because it's going to cost me so much money in taxes. When you look at, I'm the second income, I always consider myself to provide whatever those next marginal brackets are. I'm not going to make as much money. I'm going to have to pay for daycare, and I'm giving up the non-monetary, time that I would have with my kids that I can't ever get back. So those were always sort of my decision filters. But even now, we always use the budget, our family budget, to make decisions about, okay, well, what if the worst happened? What would we do? And there's always a lot of calm in that, when you know that if I lost my job tomorrow, I'm not too proud to go stock shelves at the grocery store. I always have a backup plan because I've always been a hard worker. And that backup plan, I think, is what gives me, even my clients right now, a lot of perspective. And right now, what I see when I talk to my clients and when I kind of have my inner dialogue is, how can I regain some control right now? And right now, when there's so much uncertainty, and when I've faced uncertainty in the past, you want to have some control over something. And so I always try to think, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And what would I do if I were really faced with that? Because I think if you're willing to stare that in the eye, it gives you a feeling of, okay, I can get past that step if that happens. And then sort of moderate it all the way from worst to best case scenario. And, you can never have a concrete plan. Obviously, that never works out.
Right.
But for me, I'm always trying to challenge people. Okay, what's the worst? If this happened, what would your plan be? And that to me has always provided a lot of perspective.
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point, and any of my staff could check and see. Last night, I actually, I started on our newsletter that goes out about 3:00 today. And I've been starting them out with sort of a personal, just words from my heart, really. And I open it up by saying, we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. And last night we were bracing for the biggest storms they anticipated here on Sunday evening. And that giving new perspective to what's the worst that could happen. But what I do think that allows people to do in a, making decisions because you're forced to is never the way that any of us want to have to pivot or innovate. But I think that's where many people find themselves right now. So finding comfort in controlling the things that you can control while the rest of everything around you seems to be out of control is an admirable characteristic, but one that I think many of us could agree. And y'all feel free to give a little thumbs up or add questions in the chat here. But we're seeing that everybody doesn't have that. So what are some things that you do or that are important in your life that help you stay grounded and confident in in knowing that you've got, so you mentioned being hardworking. So that plan B modeling, what are some things that drive that for you?
One of the things that I've always done is I've always been an early bird. And whatever your time of day is that's most precious to you, I say lock that down. Whether it's your time when you go on a walk, the time that you call your best friend or your parent, or for me, it's my quiet time in the morning. I get up, if my alarm goes up at 4 o'clock, I'm never bummed out. I'm up and at 'em. That means I got maybe an extra hour to myself today, where nobody is putting demands on me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my time when I fill myself up with news and friendships and relationships. And then usually I try to spend the first 30 to 60 minutes of my day getting through the icky stuff that I have to do. And then, so for me, exactly. For me, it's all about getting over that quick hump, so that getting through those coals, right, for the day, so that I can get on to the best part of my day, which is maintaining relationships and making sure that, I've spent time with my husband and my kids without my work and my worries hanging over my head. So for me, that's a big part of it. I've always been a fitness person. Always end my day with some sort of workout. And if I don't work out, I just completely let myself off the hook. I used to be so crazy about that. Well, if I don't do that, it won't fit into these jeans tomorrow. Now I don't really care. I'm 46. I'm getting a little spongy. It's fine. So for me, having a routine is important, but I think the most important thing right now is giving yourself the grace to get through whatever you're getting through and not make yourself crazy over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting. I know many on the call are Southerners like myself, and many are not, from other places. But I think it's ingrained in a lot of us to give that extra measure of grace to everybody else. But through the situation that we're going through now, I think being introspective and giving ourselves the same permission that we give other people that we don't necessarily even know sometimes. I mean, so we'll give it to strangers, but how oftentimes we withhold that from ourselves. So that's encouraging to hear you mention that. So I want to circle back to something you said earlier in talking about when your kids were young and you were moving around a lot, being a military family. How did you stay? We've got a lot of the people on the call that have young kids and school age kids and are expecting or have very young children. How did you maintain your relevance as a person, as a mom, and in your career during those times with small kids in the picture?
I think if you back out of my time from Georgia, because that's when I started working at Morgan Stanley, like a real professional job again. I spent that kind of pocket of 6 or 7 years making sure my LinkedIn profile had as many connections as possible, and genuine connections. I was never one of these people that would take anybody. Even to this day, about every 6 months, I'll go through and be like, I don't even know who this person is. You're out. I want that to be a genuine network. I want that to be people who take my phone calls. I stayed in touch with people. I've always been pretty good about that. Really, really good about it before I was working because I had the time to do it. I would send people emails. I was never a big Hallmark card person, but I always stayed in touch. Those relationships for me were the number one thing in my life. And they still are important to me. But that really, I think, kept me front of mind for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I do that 4 lenses, thing. And about 85% of the population falls into one of 2 categories: your traditional people and your fun people. And most of those people agree that when it's their birthday or they've got some significant thing going on in their life, they want to be heard from. And so I've tried to be a master of that. I learned how to build websites for a couple of the nonprofits that I was on. And I always have sat on boards, even now and back then. I always sat on boards I was always tapped to redraft the bylaws. I was always tapped to rebuild their organizational processes. And so I always tell people, if you're in between, or even if you have a great job, but it's not satisfying and you want to step into something else, a lot of times that nonprofit board work is a great way for you to get to know some influencers, and it's a great way for you to get some relevant skills that translate very smoothly into maybe your next step.
Absolutely. And I love the part that you mentioned birthdays and the cleaning up of your LinkedIn profile. So I was on a call a couple of weeks ago, and the host was talking about, right now, as we're physically distant, we're all looking for new ways to connect with people. And so I know I personally have gotten new friend requests because people have seen things that we've posted, and the question was framed around how do you keep that relevant and clean, because I'm a purist as well. Like, if I don't know you, and maybe if I don't know your mom or your kid or your sister,
yeah.
like, you're just, if I've met you, that doesn't mean you're going to be my Facebook friend. But like you, there are people that I see and I'm like, I don't know who that is. But for LinkedIn, using the milestone or anniversary reminders, for Facebook, using the birthdays. If you would feel weird giving that person, so I used to never look at birthdays on Facebook just because it was too many, too much, just a lot. But if you feel the slightest bit uncomfortable wishing that person a happy birthday, like, are they going to wonder who I am, or I'm doing this, just go ahead and unfriend them. If they really want to be your friend or somebody that you should maintain a connection with, then they'll ask to get back in, and you can blame it on a technical glitch. But I really like that, because I think one of the things that you learn through programs like our leadership program is to leverage the relationships you have and you build with your class members, as well as all those great people that that we get exposure to through calls like this, and tapping you as a resource through the trips that we go on, and the the different businesses and industry and government that we connect with. Those are all meaningful relationships, but they have to be worked, and you have to keep those regular touch points. I didn't know you before the leadership class in 2014, and I came here in November, so y'all were wrapping up. Graduation was in January. But I mean, every, I don't know, month or two, if we haven't, one of us will be texting the other one. We'll see something funny that reminds us of the other or whatever. But it's those critical relationships that we're not in it for what you're going to bring to me, but we're bringing value to one another because we've got that common bond that was established through the chamber, and then specifically through your time with the leadership class. So what influence do you think being part of the leadership program here has had on building your career, not just here, but really outside of Middle Georgia, even now?
Well, number one, I know that no matter where I live and work, that the movers and shakers are in the chamber.
Yeah.
I happen to love elections and politics, so I love it that those political leaders are involved. I just like to be a part of the group. For me, I feel that there aren't a lot of groups where I get invited to a lot of networking groups. And I call them not working groups, okay? Because a lot of times I feel like I don't even know what we're doing, or for me, I have to be very, very careful about how I spend that networking time, because I don't want to build, I have a certain client that I want to build my practice on. I don't have time to continue scaling my practice on, people that don't really want to do business with me or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? That's tough.
They're not your profile.
Yeah, it's tough to be in that position. It's good, but it's also kind of tough. But I found that the chamber's a great place because you're around decision makers who love to refer business to you. I have quite a few clients who are in the chamber there and love working with them. And for me, it keeps me tethered down there. I was actually supposed to be in Warner Robins this week.
I know.
But I'll be someday soon. I'll be back. But for me, I just, being a part of that group was just so great to develop those relationships, and then develop relationships that developed relationships for me, right? And there are a few people in the chamber there who got on board because of their relationship with you and I, or, with other people that knew each other inside the chamber, and it builds on itself. And then before you know it, you've got this incredible network of people that have things in common that, like you said, we're not going to get together and talk about money probably but we're going to get together and talk about all the other things going on because we have so much to talk about. That's what a genuine network really is.
Totally. So I've got one more question for you, and then guys, we're gonna ask you all to show your video and unmute and let a handful of you, if you'll just everybody stay muted unless you want to ask Nicci a question after this one, and then once everybody's showing videos, then we'll do that. But I guess finally, Nicci, I mean, you can't have a conversation with you and not realize at the onset that you have a passion for what you do. You have a passion for people and just a general zest for life. What advice do you have for some that may be searching for their passion?
First of all, it's nice. I think the very first question you have to ask yourself is what I'm passionate about monetizable, right? Can I make money doing it? And is the time that I'm taking away from my family and my other interests worth building this? Because if it's not, then that's still a hobby, and that's an important thing. The other thing I ask people is, what is your natural skill set? You know, what is your natural skill set? You know, I would probably be an amazing doctor, right? But I haven't gone to medical school. Okay. Nobody wants me to, I just, that's one thing I haven't had any time for. So, and same thing with practicing law. I found something that allows me to use my skill set in what I do now, but I don't have to do that particular skill set, you know? So find something that's almost right next to what you're doing, that allows you maybe the freedom that you want. And some people have to recognize in themselves, maybe the freedom isn't what they want. Maybe they need more structure. Yeah. So a lot of it is getting to know yourself and who you really are and how you see the world, and then work on those strengths. You guys will do Strengths Finder this year.
We are. Great segue.
That's an incredible opportunity for you to reweigh who you are, let yourself off the hook for things that you thought were things that you have to be good at, that maybe you're just not naturally, you know, have a natural bent for. So I would say, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, look at your skill set. And if it's something that you can monetize, great. If it's not, go to the next skill down that you can monetize. Because ultimately, if you're going to work, you want to make money, obviously, right, at it. And the other thing is, I always look at it as on a per hour basis. Is this worth being away from my home and from the things I really am passionate about? So right now, I was lucky enough to find a career that is kind of a nice hobby. My trainer said to me, I go to a personal trainer, and he said to me a few weeks ago, well, you know, what might be good for you is to have a hobby. And I was like, oh,
same.
I was like, I have a hobby. I do it all day long and I love it and I get paid to do it. And he's like, no, you need an actual hobby. And then of course, now I'm stuck in my house. So I started knitting again. So, you know, I'm never going to make money at knitting, right? Because I can't get paid what I'm worth per hour to do it.
Yeah.
So now that's my hobby. So anyway, that's my advice. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I love it. I think it's very helpful. So guys, if you will, I'm going to show non-video participants. So now I can see all of y'all. If you will start turning your videos back on. And this is the time where you get to ask Nicci questions. So y'all don't be shy. If you will just unmute yourself so we can see who's unmuted. And oh, there's two screens of y'all. Let me make this wider so hopefully I can see everybody all in view. All right, who's got a question? Rachel, you got a question there?
No, sorry, I'm just trying to.
John, you got a question?
I don't.
Nope. All right, who's got a question? Y'all give me a little wave if you want to ask Nicci something. Yes, Jenny.
I just want to say hi.
Hi, Jenny.
How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
That's all I wanted to do.
What's that?
That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to say hello.
Okay.
I know. Don't you miss her, Jenny?
I do.
I miss seeing her down here all the time.
I do.
Yep.
Now I'm going to have an accent all afternoon.
Just call everybody y'all. Hey, Daniel, you got a question? Or Chris?
I don't have a question. so much as I just wanted to tell Nicci I appreciate her sharing her story. I'm living a very similar situation, not to get too dark, just want to let everybody know in the group. I buried my son last Friday. We lost him after my wife was 27 weeks pregnant. We lost him. So I appreciate you sharing your story. I've had multiple people reach out to me. It's good to feel like you're not alone in something like that. So,
you know, loss is tough, and I tell people the story all the time, and I'm smiling about it now. It's been 14 years, but I tell people all the time, you know, my mom came and stayed with me, and I said to her, because this had happened to us a year before, and so I kind of knew what I needed, and I told my mom, look, you're welcome to stay here, but don't be judging me. I'm going in my room every afternoon with a bowl of Cheetos. I'm going to put on my pajamas. I'm going to watch TV. And she was so gracious. And the best advice anybody gave us through that time was this. Because I said to this pastor we had talked about, how am I going to get through this? How is our marriage going to do this? And he said, Nicci, you got to understand, you know, Chris is going to want to go back to work. And that's how he's going to process through it. And he's not going to cry like you are. And he said, you know, Chris, Nicci's going to not be over this for a long time. And there's a lot going on here. And she said, as long as you two give each other the grace to grieve the way you need to and respect each other, you're going to do great. So it can, it's something that you won't ever share that with anybody else in your life. And it will make your marriage and your family stronger. And I'm really sorry to hear about it. So sorry.
I didn't want to dampen the mood of the group, but I just wanted to let everybody know. But well, I appreciate you sharing.
Daniel, you have been in our staff's prayers. We saw that over the weekend, and of course, you know, reached out on Facebook. And knowing Nicci's story, I didn't know if she would bring it up or not, and I intentionally did not tell her or mention it or anything. And so I really do. I'm glad to hear that message was there for you. And perhaps for others in the group. And I think right now more than ever, those things that connect us are what remind us that behind what all is going on with the virus and with business climate and all the other things that we can't control, there are other people, and we do have shared experiences, and our humanity is what is going to get us through this, and our opportunity to connect and be vulnerable and learn from and know that there are other people that are going through this or have been through this, and they've survived and thrived. And so I just want to reiterate that we love you guys and have certainly had you in our prayers as well. Chris, did you have a question?
I did, but I can't follow that.
Yeah, well, can you try?
Looking over your career, what do you think were the qualities that made you successful?
Well, in my current career, because it's financial advisor is a pretty tough gig. And one of the things that helped me a lot is obviously the relationships that always gave me referrals to get my business going. I always was open to the ideas of what other people are doing. I talked a lot, and to this day, when I'm home right now, I'll call my colleagues and be like, what are you guys talking about right now? What are your clients worried about? You know, I want to make sure I'm not off on some island, you know, doing something different than everybody else. Yet I want to differentiate myself. So that's different, but I just never gave up. I mean, never gave up. And using a budget as a tool in your personal finances allows you a lot of leeway to not give up, because you always know what those risk tolerances are, right? You know how much risk you can take to keep your boat afloat at home. And, you know, when I see people making big career and personal mistakes, a lot of times it's because they haven't allowed themselves that pad to get through a risky event or a tolerance event. And then they get put in positions where they have to make a decision based on money. And so that to me has been the number one thing that's helped me the most, is knowing how long can I stick in this, you know. I had one year where I made a lot less money than I wanted to make. And I wasn't very happy about it, but I was like, but I'm coming back next year, baby. And I did.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes in my business to do that, is you just have to know those are when your commitment to your career and your profession are being challenged the most. And everybody's going through that right now. Everybody.
Yep. Michelle, you got something?
Oh no, I can relate to Nicci on so
Yeah.
many levels. I'm a former Air Force wife as well, and that persistence in starting a business, and absolutely, I relate to it all.
Yeah, it helped me a lot to go. One of the beautiful things about being an Air Force spouse is it gives you a world and a national view that you might not have otherwise. And so for me, I knew that if my practice extended to other parts of the country, I would never depend on a local economy or local place where we lived. So I have clients in 41 states, I think, and I think that helped me the most. The Air Force, being an Air Force spouse is definitely a plus when you're in it, but boy, to outsiders, it can be really, really tough because all they see is somebody who's leaving in 2 years, you know, so.
Yeah.
Who else has questions?
So I actually have a question. So, you know, I kind of did the same thing as probably about 7 or 8 years ago. The job I had, I never wanted, but I'd taken it after the crash of 2008 and lost my job with Citigroup. And so, basically was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And somebody's like, well, what do you want to do? And I used to volunteer with some nonprofits and do events. And I was like, well, if I can get paid to do that, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so from being on the board of museum here, a job opened up and I applied for it and got it, and it didn't pay anything, but I knew that it was a career path and an open door to get to do what I want to do. So that being said, I am doing the job I'm very passionate about. And so I'm the sales and event manager for a large conference center that does like 500-600 people. Now,
Okay.
my concern is that I don't know now what my backup plan will be if we can't have mass gatherings for another 9-10 months.
Yeah.
So that's been, there is no, because you were saying, well, think of a backup plan, but I'm like, I don't know, because this is my passion and my career, and I don't know when we'll ever get back to that. And I'm not stressed right now because of the CARES Act and, being furloughed, luckily with that, it's bringing in at least my base income, and I did a lot of commissions, but, financially it's working out. But, I'm like, but what happens if 8 months from now I still can't go back to work, or 9 months, and I'm like, because I do sales and events, like, I don't know what my backup plan would be, because there's not a lot, I don't live in Atlanta, anymore. And, I don't know. So I don't know if you have any insight or thoughts to, like what would be something you would do if there is no real backup plan you could fall on. I mean, really the only option would be to take a job for the sake of a job. I don't know.
Well, plan B is always good to take a job for the sake of a job, but
Right.
It's always better than making no money. But, this is a great opportunity for you to expand your vision and go follow what other event planners are doing in New York and Chicago and Atlanta, and figure out what they're doing and bring that substitute activity into your business and apply it in Warner Robins, which is a pretty cosmopolitan place. I know there's tons of great food down there, and I know you've got community leaders like April who love events. They're not going to let those die. April, are you going to have an event the minute you can have one? Yes,
yes.
I know you are. Yes. Yeah. And I know Southerners, they can't stay away from the food and the folks very long. You've got to get back into it. So I think that there's some opportunities there, especially to do some research on what can make you, like, you could leverage your abilities and your business in the future. And why not do some copycatting from some of these bigger cities, event planners, see what they're doing right now. They're all feeling the same stress you are. Maybe follow hotels and, caterers and things like that. See what they're doing. And there's got to be an opportunity here. There has to be, like I said, remember how I said you're right here, but why don't you pick something right next to it that can also expand who you were before? And that's when you can double your income and maybe even your passion too.
Yeah, so I want to add, David, just because I was just on a call last night about something very related to this. So, a lot of paid services and organizations have kind of opened up right now. So, I know that IFEA, the International Festival and Event Association, and some others have some free webinars and things that they're doing that folks in that industry or who are interested in that industry have an opportunity to network with peers and to learn some of those best practices. But another perspective that I thought was very interesting and honestly surprised me when I heard it, but it's spot on, is that event management is project management with it's pretty project management. And so in the necessity of having work, project management, that is something that there will never be in short supply in a military community. So whether it's in aerospace or in another field, it might not be the same type or scale events that you're doing or projects, but it really does require the same skill set. And there are ways that you can bring that attention to detail and experiential elements that I know you pride yourself on in an adjacent field as something just to explore while you've got time to research and look into things. That's certainly a viable option to consider, I would think.
Okay, that's good to know.
You could get your PMP certification. That's highly valued in the military logistics world. And that would be a great plan B. And that certification never hurt you in your own career field, I would think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who else? Anybody
Chris,
else?
I just sat for my PMP, so it'll be interesting if you want to have a dialogue about that. I literally just sat for it 2 weeks ago, so.
There you go.
There.
See?
Perfect. Thank you.
Boom.
All right. Who else? Any questions, any insights, any thoughts before we let Nicci go and chat as a class for a few minutes? Tyler.
So I'm kind of, what you were saying about the hobby thing and can I make money at it? I'm kind of in a unique situation where I'm afforded the opportunity to do something for work. I work on base, so I make decent money doing that. But on the side, I do hobbyist woodworking. And, the first thing that people say when they meet me after they've seen some of my work, they say, well, why aren't you doing this full time? And I think that there's an important delineation that a lot of people don't make when they are pursuing those hobbies, is sometimes you have to know that this hobby is only enjoyable as a hobby.
Yes.
And with hobbyist woodworking, my busy time is typically around Christmas, right? And so I get a unique look what it would feel like to do the job full time. And, sometimes there's just a line that needs to be drawn. I am only going to do this as a hobby so I can continue to enjoy doing this.
1,000%.
Yeah, my husband is thinking about flying for the airlines next year when he retires from the Air Force, and he's always like, I just feel like I'd be so bored when I'm not flying, and I get that. And one of his friends, who was also a very talented woodworker, told him, look, you see that as a job, flying airplanes, which is a skill that he could monetize, right? And see it as a job that allows you to pursue your passions on the side. And so that's what I think an important distinction. I think you make a great point. And so, yeah, balancing all of that is really important. It's part of what took me so long to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that. Anybody else with any final parting questions or thoughts for Nicci before we let her go? Anybody? Heather, you got one? You look like you're pointing, or are you just moving your camera? Okay. Nicci, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's always a treat to talk to you, but I think today's message was very timely, and I think all of us took something away that either we didn't know before or reinforced something we just needed to hear right now. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You guys made my day.
Yes, and hug your
Good.
family for us. We can't wait to see you when you come back. And for the class, this is good. So Nicci does have clients still here in Middle Georgia. She does routinely come down and gives us notice. So
Yes.
we typically try to have some kind of get together. So we may promote when Nicci's going to be at the chamber for a little while, because you got to come see our new digs. Our renovation is sweet.
So excited.
And so maybe we'll have a little come meet Nicci at the chamber when you come back.
I could do a ribbon cutting of my
I love it. I'm here for
back.
it. Yes, we have the scissors. Michelle will hook you up.
I always wanted to use the scissors.
All right, very good. Thank you, Nicci. We appreciate
All right. Thanks for
that.
having me. Bye.
Bye.